Okay, guys, I'm so happy to be here, and I will get to my presentation, but oh my gosh, I'm going to start crying immediately. I can't do this. But I just want to start off with saying that earlier this year, I was in a position where I was absorbing all this information. I was reading like a book a week. I was diving so deep into all the quantum and cruise stuff, and I just got to a place where I felt like I was like, holy shit, I don't even know what to do with this. How do I even apply this to clients? What do I do? And I got into a state of prayer, and I asked God, I was like, can you please help me find someone, community that will help me help others around me and actually apply. And so it's not like, who said this? Sam said this yesterday. It's not so much like mental masturbation anymore. It's like actually using this information to help people. And then what felt like a bit out of the blue, Kiara just came into my life, and I tell her all the time, but seriously, she feels like such an answered prayer. She's become one of my best friends in a short period of time, and I'm so unbelievably grateful, and I'm literally so grateful for each and every one of you here today. I literally have cried so many times at this retreat. I've never been in a room with so many real, authentic people and so many tan people. Like, you guys are all really hot, you know? Like, everyone is looking good, so this is fantastic. I love to see it. But anyway, so getting to my presentation, I am going to be talking about how to guide the body to heal itself. And I'm going to be focusing on homeopathy a bit, not too much, but this presentation is sponsored by one of our amazing sponsors, Remedy. Highly, highly recommend their homeopathic remedies. I've been using them quite a lot and have had fantastic effects from them. So just to start this off, I'd really like everyone to close your eyes. If you're standing, maybe take a seat, but if you feel better standing, that's fine. So I think everyone's minds here are incredibly advanced. I don't think I've been in a room with so many people that are so intelligent. It's a bit intimidating, but I really would like to ask you to go inwards and feel. Feel your heartbeat, feel your breath, just feel how your body is feeling. And I know in this space we learn a lot about toxic light, EMFs, seed oils, all the things, but I want you to remember that your body is extremely powerful and your body can actually heal. And despite all these environmental stressors and toxins, you are so much more powerful than all these things. And of course, we know that we want to be aware of these things, and we, want to maximize our vitality and our strength, but we need to remember that we are very, very, very powerful beings. And I've seen miracles that are completely unexplained by any of these things. And it's really important to drop back in and live in a state of faith rather than a state of fear, because it does not matter how well your circadian rhythm is aligned. It doesn't matter how perfect your EMF environment is and how, much you avoid seed oils. If you are living in a state of fear, and Olivia showed this with like David Hawkins' work, which I highly recommend diving into, you're never going to really be able to heal. And shifting your consciousness level to going into faith and surrender, this is one of the best ways that you can actually heal. And in my opinion, this overpowers absolutely everything else. And just to remember that to be alive really today is a miracle in itself. So with that being said, I invite you back to open your eyes, and I will begin this presentation. So to start, I wrote this the other day. I was like, oh, cool, got this. Healing is not about fixing what's broken. It's about uncovering the wisdom of the body and awakening its innate power to thrive. Now, the first part of this is super key. It is not about fixing what is broken. And why is this? It's because I don't believe that we are ever really broken. I just believe that we get a little bit out of balance. And personally, I believe in God, I believe in a creator, but even if you don't, if you believe in evolution, it's very clear to know that our bodies are intricately aligned to function harmoniously with our natural world. And this has been explained however many times today from all the speakers. So we know that we are supposed to live in a certain way, and really we are not the ones that are broken. As Kiera has taught me, it's not you that's broken, it's your environment that's broken. So our bodies are really wise, and we're constantly receiving information from food, light, sound, other frequency, and then we're responding to these inputs. So again, is it our body that is the problem, or are we simply just responding? And I wanted to say thank you to Olivia for putting this so well today, and that little wheel thing showing that. Recently I've been diving into like the cell danger response, and this has like been so beautiful for me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. All these people with all these problems, it's just showing that they're not really the problem. They're literally just responding to these issues, and or like these environmental issues, and their body is in a state of fear, as I said earlier. And then I wrote a bunch of notes about what the speakers said, because I thought it was really beautiful and I wanted to tie it in. So Sam said earlier that our current medical system is very reaction based, and they're reaction based. They're saying, oh yeah, here's something that's broken, we're going to react to it. But then they're also telling people that they are broken when they do this. And for me, this is something that kind of struck me pretty hard, because I believed I was broken for more than half of my life. Like ever since I was a child, I always thought like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my mind. I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm anxious, I'm like OCD, all these things. But I didn't really know what was wrong with me, but I knew something was wrong with me. I go to the doctor, they're like, oh yeah, there is something wrong with you. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, great. But now what do I do? And it was like, oh, here's some pills and some more pills and this and this and this. But it was still confirming the belief that I was broken and that there was nothing I could do to fix it. And it really wasn't until I felt empowered enough to make change and shift the mindset to believe that I wasn't broken, I was just out of balance. So this is a question. Whoever answers gets a potential prize at the end, chosen by me. But what do you think the main cause of disease is in the body? You guys can say whatever you want, maybe multiple answers. Yep.
An imbalance in energetics.
Okay. Anyone else? Great answer. Inflammation. Mitochondrial dysfunction. Anything else? The mind. Yep. All correct. And I like to say that it's anything that brings the body out of homeostasis. So all those things do that. So you guys are probably familiar with the fish tank, right? Most of you guys know this. Again, it's not that you're broken, but your environment is. So this is our current environment. Can you guys tell me what are some things contributing to the dirty fish tank?
EMFs.
Yep. Just yell it out. Yep. Anything else? MK Ultra programming, you know, more things like that, all the things. Okay. So, of course, as I said earlier, the doctors are telling the fish, this fish is messed up, it's broken, you know, it keeps getting medicated. This poor fish is extremely disempowered. Now, this fish over here, it's doing better. It's cleaning the tank, you know, it's wearing its blue light blocking glasses, it's regulating EMFs, it's going outside, it's grounding, doing the right things, it's getting things fixed. But someone said this to me the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, whoa, I need to include this in the presentation. This fish is still in the tank, unfortunately. And we are all still in a tank. And this isn't to say like we all need to go out to the woods and like become hunter-gatherers, but this is actually where we want to be. We don't just want to clean the tank. We need to think about how much can we actually return, because that is the model for health, is coming to returning to our design. And it's like everyone here, every single presentation, it's like, oh my gosh, yes, it makes complete sense. We're going into such detail of how this works and why, and it's so beautiful. But I think it's really important after all of this to come back to, it's actually like really simple. Like we need to try to return to going back to nature, in my opinion, like going back to God's design as much as we possibly can. So, read this quote, and then Sarah Pugh just completely confirmed it, and I absolutely loved that, so thank you, Sarah. The reason we are in such a mess is because we're living in a false reality, and that false reality has mostly been crafted by false science. And this just hit me really hard. Dr. Lee Merritt said this. Of course, we know like not all science is fake. Not every single study is like wrong and problematic and things like that. But it's kind of, in my opinion, like the base of like where it's coming from a lot of the time. And so many studies are conducted for financial like incentives, you know. And unfortunately, like this is just like the deeper you dive down the rabbit hole, you know, the more problematic it is. And if any of you are familiar with like Dr. Robert Becker and Andrew Marino, I'm not sure if you guys have read Going Somewhere, but reading that book was really difficult for me. Even though I kind of knew these things, it then became very real that there's so much corruption, and essentially like our entire society and like what we believe is true and what we believe health is a false reality based off of this false science, or like lack of truth in science, more specifically. And don't get me wrong, I love science. I think it's fantastic, and I won't stop researching it, but I think it's really important to not worship science as God, and I think that's what a lot of people have started to do. I like to think of it as something where it's like we're trying to understand the mind of God or the universe, whatever you guys want to say about it. But I think, yeah, it really comes down to wanting to discover nature rather than trying to outsmart it, which is what our current medical system has done. So coming into homeopathy a little bit with this. In homeopathy, we believe that there's a vital force that's kind of within us. It is us. It's the foundational unseen energy that animates and regulates all living beings. I think in Chinese medicine, this is like kind of the qi, and so many, I guess, like alternative, like, what am I trying to say here? Alternative medicines and whatnot, like they all acknowledge that there is a force, there's an energy within all of us. And this kind of seems woo-woo, but it's not woo-woo. It's actually quite real. And as time goes on, I think science will be able to explain this better. And Sarah Pugh, you know, really did that well in her presentation today. So when this force is balanced, the body can maintain health and recover from illness really well. But when this is weakened, this is when we get symptoms and dis-ease. And really, this comes down to what I mentioned earlier, anything that brings us out of homeostasis. So I like to think of it as, you know, our body, you know, like we have all these rivers running within us, like all the time it's flowing. And when we have an event, a trigger, a trauma, something, anything that puts us kind of into like that cell danger response, the things Olivia was talking about, we kind of get a dam or like some blockages on those rivers. And again, we're not broken, but there's something that's stuck. And I like to think of trauma. And when I say trauma, I don't just mean like an emotional or like really intense event happening. It can be any perceived danger by the body that keeps us stuck in time in a way. And this creates blockages in the body. It's blocking some of those rivers of energy flow. And when we have those blockages, we get dis-ease. And Charles did a wonderful job of like explaining the fascia, and like everyone here who participated in that felt that probably when we were digging our balls in the fascia there, where there is some blockages, and we want to create that movement and that flow, because we get dis-ease when we lack movement, when there's stagnation. So we want to think about health as something that's flowing, like it's a constant flow, like water in nature. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, so we can really think with homeopathy, the way they look at it is that it is helping the body to heal itself. So it's not the same as using medication to mask symptoms. And again, I really do believe there's a place for these things. Like if you break your arm, please don't just take an arnica homeopathy and say you're good to go. Like we need to use the tools we need to in those moments. But homeopathy is really using the body's intelligence to bring it back into center, bring it back into homeostasis, and helping it heal itself. And something I really think is incredible in homeopathy is that we recognizes that imbalances have roots that go beyond physical. And this is something that is really, really hard for people who are very narrow-minded in science. Obviously not you guys, but you know, the people that are very deep into like centralized science, they don't necessarily understand the impact of the emotional and spiritual body on the physical body, and that it's actually all one. These things are not separate at all. So personally, I just wanted to touch on this. I do not mean this to be triggering. for any of you, but I don't really believe that light is enough, and I don't believe food is enough, or that plants are enough, and even homeopathy, which I think is fantastic, it doesn't fix our trauma directly. It doesn't fix our emotions directly. And it can go a long way. All these tools, circadian alignment, all these things, they can really, really help us. But we can't rely on these things to fix us. And again, I'm going to bring in David Hawkins' work, huge fan. I would highly recommend his books. If you are living in this low frequency state, your body is not going to be able to heal. And we see this all the time in the quantum space even. People get really, really dogmatic. And, I get clients coming to me. Some of them, I'm like, I don't know if I believe you that you're fully blocking blue light all the time. But for the most part, I see that people, they actually are putting in immense effort to do the right things. And they're still not well. They're still diseased. And then I ask them about their emotional state. I ask them about their trauma. And I'm like, well, have you ever looked into that? And the answer is normally no. And this is where it's one of the most important things that a lot of people ignore a lot. And kind of as I said earlier, I believe that we've become so hyper-intellectualized as a society that we've forgotten how to feel, and we really can't see our emotional and spiritual health. So it often gets ignored until it shows up into physical symptoms. And my view is when we try to even over explain and intellectualize our health and emotions, we actually are lacking trust. And I said this earlier, but when we're lacking trust, what is the opposite of that? It's fear. And we become so dependent when we're living in fear on centralized things that rather than trusting our body, trusting a greater power and its innate power to heal and thrive, we rely on other things. And this is really, really problematic. And as you guys know, this is what our government, our medical systems are doing, is they're creating fear in our society. And this is causing people to be reliant on them. If you've ever looked into the abusive relationship cycles before, whoever's gone into that, that's exactly what's going on. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of people could heal so much easier if they actually just felt empowered. So I just wanted to kind of share a personal thing. So I have been into, this work for a long time, holistic health, probably since I was 13 or 14 years old. I was always just passionate about it. I don't know if you guys have watched The X-Files. I always bring this up, but I rewatched it recently because I was kind of interested. I'm like, oh, this makes sense why I have all these conspiracy theories ingrained in my brain because they exposed a lot of that back then. But yeah, I was always interested, and it was, I thought it was fun. I did a lot of healing work, a lot of trauma work and stuff because I have childhood trauma. But about 3 years ago, I experienced a really intense trauma. And this sent me into a full fight or flight state that I have never experienced in my life. And I actually came to a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, there is nothing that I can do right now to outthink this situation. And I was forced to fully surrender. I was forced to fully surrender to God and to my life, and just know that the only way that I was going to heal and that I was going to get better is by actually feeling my emotions and dropping in. And so although I love learning and consuming information, I really believe that some of the greatest mysteries in life we're really not supposed to explain, and this actually takes the magic out of it. So we actually need to feel these things. But coming back to homeopathy, what I really like is that it actually acknowledges this. And it's saying that, hey, we're not trying to fix you. We're just going to give you the right codes to help your body come back into flow. So, next quote by Gandhi. Homeopathy cures a larger percentage of cases than any other method of treatment and is beyond doubt safer and economical and most complete medical science. Does anyone know what happened when the Rockefellers came in? Does anyone want to say it? Yeah, they sent SWAT teams to all the old ladies' houses, and they're like, yeah, this homeopathy, major crime. It's out.
This was my grandma, who's a cardiologist. I talked about how we got to the current American system, and they basically came in using the power of the Constitution and the public trust and said every person who doesn't graduate from an allopathic medical school is a quack. And they didn't remove the people currently in practice is they just shut down all the medical schools for minorities and women, homeopathy and naturopath, everything else, everything. They basically gave the keys to the cartel to allopathic medicine. That was what the collection report did.
Wow.
Ooh,
Yeah. So that's crazy, right? Like, that's insane. And it's so funny because that's been so ingrained into like medicine nowadays that they actually look at this as quackery when it was, the standard for a really long time.
It was actually more successful. That was the problem, is the allopaths were dying on the vine and they're not making any money. And so they basically wanted to use political power to outlaw their competition. That's what happened.
Yeah, because it's really hard to like really monetize homeopathy, and you can't put petroleum in it either, so it doesn't work. But just wanted to say a little history on it. I won't go too deep, but it began in like the 18th century, a long time ago. A German physician, Samuel Hahnemann. I'm not sure if I pronounced that properly. Hagen, maybe you can say that better. But that's okay. It's derived from the Greek words like and suffering, and the guiding principle of homeopathy is like cures like, or the law of similarities. And that when a substance in a large dose can cause certain symptoms, in small doses, it can actually cure these same symptoms. Very interesting. So a way I like to think of it, my brain kind of wraps my head around it this way, is that it's giving the body the right codes so the body can actually heal itself. It's not doing the healing for you. So what I really love about that is that it's, again, not looking at the body as something that's broken. Rather, it's empowering the body to do what it's already good at. So essentially herbs like plants, minerals, even venom from snakes, other substances like the methylene blue one that we were given, all these things can be used to make homeopathic remedies. So they're diluted over and over again, and then they're actually successed or shaken vigorously between each dilution. This process is called sequential dilution, and succession is called potentization. So essentially the remedies are diluted so much that they don't actually really contain the molecules of the actual substance anymore. It's more the energy or the imprint of the substance. That's the only thing that remains. Sarah Pugh talked about that with like imprinting water with these kind of codes. Water holds memory. For those of you familiar with Veda Austin's work, you would know that. If not, I highly recommend diving into that. So when we're using it, we actually add it to water. So I'll just show you guys. Here we have this beautiful kit from Remedy, and oh my gosh, it's like all these little essential oil bottles essentially, and you literally put like 2 drops in. And when I first used these, I'm like, really? 2 drops of this already like heavily diluted substance is going to do something? All right, I'm open to a lot of things. I'll do just about anything. And I was shocked how well it worked. I was actually taken back by it, and I came in with like a skeptical mind, so I don't know, it was like I almost was trying to not want it to work, and then it just worked so well, so I thought that was super cool. But yeah, so again, what's left isn't really the actual substance, it's just this essence, and it's like having the memory, which helps your body heal quite gently. It's a very non-invasive approach. And yeah, again, this really worked well for me, and as you guys know, anyone that knows me, I'm not afraid to speak my mind, sometimes maybe a little too much. So if something doesn't work, I will say that it's absolute bullshit, and this actually works very well. So next quote, this was crazy. The World Health Organization said this. I was like, were they allowed to say this? I don't know. I'm surprised. It's like, is this real? Homeopathy is the 2nd largest system of medicine in the world, and it's still widely used, but I think it's just looked down upon so much and shunned. But I just thought that was really funny. It was on Remedy's website, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. And going a little more into the philosophy of like cures like, it's like matching the symptom pattern with a remedy that triggers similar symptoms in a healthy person. So it's kind of a medicine of resonance, where the remedy, I like to see it as this way. It acts as a mirror. So it goes into the body and it reflects the imbalances that lie within us, and it's kind of reminding our body how to heal itself, like where to direct the energy, which I think is really, really beautiful. Again, it's not invasive. It's not like, as Kira mentioned earlier, like when we're just taking vitamin D supplements, this is quite kind of dangerous to the body. We don't know what else it's like going to do, and all these other medications. Homeopathy is really safe because it's not doing this. It's just giving us reflection of what's wrong, so our body can adjust to it, and we're not going to like become ill and have like really negative reactions from taking homeopathic remedies. So it's like just so much safer than all these other things. So an example, when I was diving into this, I thought it was super, super cool. So I want to ask you guys, what happens when you cut onions? You cry. Yeah, and what else? Like kind of runny nose, right? Like you get all agitated and it's like, I freak out. I get really uneasy. And what happens when you get hay fever? Same thing. So what happens when someone has hay fever? We'll give them an onion homeopathic remedy, and this actually really relieves the symptoms. So super cool. But next one, this one was almost confusing to me, and then I wrapped my head around it and I thought it was really cool. So what happens if you drink too much coffee? Jittery. Yeah, or like anxious all over the place. Now what happens, like anyone here have like really bad insomnia or like anxiety before sleep? Kind of the same feeling at night. So when someone has really bad insomnia and like super anxious before sleep, we'll actually give them a coffee homeopathic remedy. And one more thing with this, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but there's a lot of skepticism with homeopathy, and this is mostly because we in like modern science, kind of like as we know it, can't really see it. And mainstream medicine obviously doesn't like it because we're working with things that are a little bit beyond their way of measuring things. So it's quite dismissed. But obviously, because of centuries of practice and countless testimonials, we know that it's quite real. And it's a healing that really honors energy, and it's not always easy to quantify, so people just completely dismiss it. Similar with light therapy. We only really believe in light therapy now because there's actually studies showing that it's true, even though it's pretty damn obvious that the sun would be good for us, Next thing. So focus on bioindividuality. This is something that I think it's probably the most important part of my practice. Homeopathy really acknowledges this as well. But no two people heal the same way because no two people have the same story. A lot of people get really, really dogmatic, even in this space. So we need to remember that everyone is different and heals in different ways. Not everyone is going to have the same prescription, and not everyone is going to miraculously heal every condition just by going out in the sun and grounding every day. Even though that will always be part of my protocol for people, it's not always enough. And it's really, really important to come back to that and remember that everyone's different and everyone will need different things. So again, this is why I really love homeopathy, because they do not claim that every single, symptom profile and like match with the remedy that's going to work for every single person. They completely acknowledge that each person is going to need like different combinations and maybe even need things that don't really like make sense according to the notes or like what they would rather or like what they would refer to, because they know that everyone comes from different places and that why someone is getting those symptoms. For instance, like maybe someone isn't getting isn't getting rashes because of like histamine intolerance or something in the body. Like maybe it's like due to something that's very, very emotional, and that they don't need like a nettle remedy. They need an anxiety remedy, things like that. So it really comes down to acknowledging bioindividuality, which I think is just so important on every level. And again, kind of building off of that, no two symptoms are unrelated within the same body. And as we know now, the presentations today really acknowledge that everything is so interconnected. Charles explained this really beautifully with the fascia. It's like a web with our body. Like our left foot is connected to our right hand and all these things. And it's so beautiful how that all works. Okay. But we need to look at everything within the body. And this is where centralized medicine really fails, because it's become so tunnel visioned that it's not acknowledging that someone's very physical issues could be due to their emotional state. Like most don't see that liver issues could be deeply related to resentment and anger, and thyroid issues could be related to suppressing our voice and so much more. We have so much tunnel vision, and even in the holistic and quantum space, I know you all have seen that, probably experienced it yourselves multiple times. We need to zoom out and look at the whole picture and remember the fish. We're not just looking at the fish in the tank anymore. We need to come back and put it in the ocean as much as we can. This is so important, because It's the whole picture, and it's really, really fun to get hyper specialized and, dive into all these things. I love it, but it's like, come on, zoom out, look at nature. That is really the answer. Next quote. This is something I share with a lot of my clients, and I think it's so important. And when I first learned this, I feel like my whole life changed. Andrea Moritz, he wrote the liver gallbladder flush book, and I really like to do that flush, but this was in the book, and I was like, wow, this is super cool. But symptoms are not the disease. They only indicate that the body is attempting to save and protect itself. They signal the body's need for attention, support, and care. So treating disease as if it were an enemy, when in reality it's a survival attempt, actually sabotages the body's healing abilities and sows the seed for further illness. So I think this kind of relates back to the idea almost of like the false science idea. When we look at a lot of diseases and sickness, people are labeling symptoms and they're saying this person is sick, they are this disease, they are these issues. They're not considering that these symptoms are not just a response, but a cry for help from the body, and they're also the body's healing processes. So I have a lot of doctors in the crowd. Can someone tell me why we get a fever? Is anyone? Or not a doctor? Go ahead.
So one of the reasons is because high temperatures are actually going to denate simple proteins like viruses and small bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
Heat turns on the NRF2 pathway, which is an anti-aging pathway. Heat turns on heat shock proteins, which is a chaperone protein, and other.
Yeah.
All that and improves the efficiency of some of the enzymatic processes, like the myeloperoxidase and other stuff.
So the fever happens for a reason,
Correct.
and it's beneficial, right?
Stop. Fever.
And what happens if we eat something that's makes not good, poisonous, rotten? We usually throw up. Why is that? Because our body's trying to get rid of the toxins. And do we look at someone and say, oh, you're sick, there's something broken about you because you threw up? No, your body is reacting and it's doing something for you. But most of the time, like in medicine, we look at these symptoms and diseases, they're not looking at it as a healing process. And I know this is like a bold claim, but even diving into like really intense diseases, it's like, why is that happening in the body? The question is why. And we need to consider that maybe the body is trying to process something and healing something. And something, I'll go, far to say, I know this might be a little bit intense, but a lot of times when we're not addressing our emotional health and not addressing trauma, the healing process is the dis-ease. And the body actually, or the mind, emotional body, mind, it's the time where it's actually experiencing healing through the disease. And this is something that might be a really tough pill to swallow, and I apologize if it's triggering anyone, but I've talked to many people who've had really intense chronic diseases, even people with cancer, and they actually, for the first time in their life, are experiencing healing of their trauma, of their emotional state through their disease. This is something where, again, the body's intelligent. I'm not saying this is every case, but I just always like to look to a further why. So we listen when it hurts, building off of that. This is something that Kira always says, so I really wanted to include it. But again, symptoms are the body's language. It's a message from our body, and it's calling us for attention. So in homeopathy, again, symptoms are not the enemy. They're actually guiding us. They're the insight. We like symptoms because it's giving us a little window into the body, like what's going on. Symptoms are the way the body is communicating where the imbalance lies. So this is really beautiful. It's more problematic when we don't have symptoms, and then we have to look deeper. So the symptoms are really nice, actually, especially for practitioners who have to help people. It makes it a lot easier. But instead of silencing symptoms, homeopathy really helps to understand the root cause. And usually this is way more emotional than it is physical things. And I really believe that healing, it's something that is not just about relief. It's transformation and returning to balance, and it really comes to alchemizing pain. So again, the body is in communication, as I said earlier, but one thing I really wanted to touch on, we've forgotten how to listen to our body. We've become so disconnected. There's so much freaking noise everywhere. EMFs, light, just like noise, like this music that's been blasting all day, that's been making me like kind of lose it a little bit. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that. I'm like, at home I live in a forest and there's no noise. So then I come into society and I'm like, oh my gosh, everything is so loud, all the lights, all the EMFs, right? And it's become really, really difficult to listen to ourselves. I remember one time I was like back in my Apple Watch days before I knew about EMFs. I'd wear an Apple Watch to go surfing because that was the only reason why I really wore it. So I knew what time it was because I'd be out there for like 4 hours. But I remember wearing it and I would get notifications that my environment was too loud. Like, I don't know if any of you guys have seen that, but it would give you like a noise warning. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not even playing music. Like, this is just the environment I'm living in. And that was just a big insight to, listen to that and hear that like there's so much noise in our society. And this is really stopping us from allowing to listen to ourselves. And we'll hear this like when people go out camping for a while, spending a lot of time in the woods, they come back into society and they get so hypersensitive. And this is like a lot of things, like when you start blocking blue light, it starts to get really bad when you start to see light at night. Like it gets really irritating where it wasn't that way beforehand. I don't know about you guys, but now if I see a light at night, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like a vampire. So same thing here. But anyway, we really need to come back to being able to listen to our body, because it's not just like in communication with us sometimes, it's in communication with us all the time. And it's gotten to the point where we're really bad at listening to it whispering that it starts to scream. And this is when we get really sick and really diseased. And then we look at ourselves as broken when really our body is just asking us, hey, can you pay attention to me so we can come back into balance and just do what we're supposed to do for you? Again, oh yeah, okay, next slide. We heal when we're ready. This is something Kira and I talk about a lot. So although I'm a huge fan of homeopathy and I send most of my clients to homeopaths, and I think it's fantastic, and I'm a huge fan of the circadian practices and all the right things, animal-based nutrition, raw nutrition, all the things. There's so many health practices, but really there's no specific thing that is going to do the work for us. And I know I've said that like 10 times already, but it really is the most important thing. And I believe that we only heal when we're ready to heal. And a lot of this comes back to bringing safety into the body. And we bring safety, of course, by coming into nature, turning down the noise, of EMFs, light, feeling our body properly. But it's really about creating safety emotionally. And this is real. And we can look at it where, how many of you know someone that smokes cigarettes and like eats shit food and then they look fantastic, and it's like, why? Well, because they're just chilling. they're good. They're not worried about anything, and they're probably doing a lot better than I am in a lot of ways. And this is where we just need to remember that it's okay to just let yourself be and let yourself heal, and that although there's all these stressful things, that you're really resilient. And I really do believe we heal when we surrender to something greater than ourselves. For me, this is surrendering to what I believe is God. And this happens when we make ourselves actually feel. We create space for ourselves to feel when we cry and when we make art. For me, this is really writing music. I've felt way more healing physically writing music and actually getting my thoughts out and transmuting that into art than I have doing anything else. And I also really believe, Kira always says this as well, we heal when we find purpose and alchemize our pain. So everyone seems to have their opinions on how we heal, many opinions on when this can happen, how this can happen, but my belief is that this really goes beyond anything we can actually explain in words. And I think sometimes it's almost insulting to try to explain this in words. And that is it. So again, thank you so much to our sponsors and everyone here.